Scott, there's been a big influx of private equity investors buying professional sports teams the past couple of years. Got Josh Harris with the 76ers, you got Gores with the Detroit Pistons, now the potential of David Einhorn being an investor in the New York Mets. Why are we seeing this trend?
Yeah, I think it's really a function of where you've seen wealth creation in this country in the last 10 years. If you think about it, a lot of wealth creation in both the hedge fund and the private equity space, and these are the guys that are the logical investors at this point. I also think that many of them see these as operating companies that are underperforming. There's a chance for them to come in, turn them around, maybe cut costs, boost revenues, bring a little bit of personality to the club in order to make them more profitable.
Well, definitely with some of these teams have been underperforming or struggling financially. Talk about the Mets, the 76ers have been certainly underperforming on the court and financially. Do the sports leagues have a concern at all that maybe these guys are not in it for the long term?
Most of the leagues will put a new owner through a process. There's a very formal process in terms of the application and approval by ownership. So it's one of the serious considerations I'm sure they'll take into account when they think about bringing these guys in as partners. Are these people that are long-term partners? Are they looking at the value of the league on a long-term basis, or are they really there just for a quick buck and a turnaround? I think in the few situations we've seen so far, I think there are people that are committed to the cities that they're for the teams that they're buying. If you think about Gores, he's originally got ties back to Detroit. You think about Josh Harris, he's got ties back to Philadelphia. And I think that's a big part of the reason why that'll work.
When these guys, the private equity guys that have been buying these teams, are analyzing them as possible purchases, and you track these guys as head of the private bank sports group at JP Morgan Chase, do they approach it from a different angle than the typical sports team buyer?
I think from a P&L perspective, as they look at the opportunities for revenues and also on the cost side, I think many times they look at it like an operating company in their portfolio. They think about getting things done on a certain timeline, which is very healthy for the business. Many people will try and look at these like a typical M&A transaction, multiple of earnings or multiple of revenue, and I think these are really value investors. They look at comparable sales. What have other similar franchises sold for, and can I get a deal here with the opportunity for some upside?
Yeah, I think the timeline that you mentioned is a key point, because you look at the St. Louis Blues. Dave Checketts was the minority owner. He brings in Tower Brook Capital Partners. They're there for 5 years. Yep. They own 70%. They say, we're out of here. Now he's got to sell the team. So there really is a lot of pressure, particularly on these teams like the Blues, for instance, had a lot of debt, still have a lot of debt. If you're highly leveraged, you really are under the gun to turn things around quickly.
I think there's an important distinction to be made there. If you think about a guy like Tom Gores or Josh Harris, they bought the teams individually. They did not buy them within their funds. If you think about the Blues situation, Tower Brook bought that within a fund, sort of a different mindset. And I think that going forward, that's probably something that the leagues will look at very carefully. When they evaluate a private equity buyer, is this someone who really needs to turn it around and show a return to investors within 5 or 7 years as sort of a hard deadline, or do they have more financial flexibility than that? And obviously from the league's perspective, they'd rather see someone with some financial flexibility.